This week, we are diving into one of the most chilling and enigmatic cases in criminal history, the Zodiac Killer. From the late 1960s to early 1970s, a shadowy figure known only as the Zodiac terrorized Northern California, leaving a trail of cryptic letters, ciphers, and unsolved murders. Despite extensive investigations and numerous theories, the true identity of the Zodiac Killer remains a mystery to this day. Join us as we explore the facts, theories, and lasting impact of this infamous case that continues to haunt the collective imagination. I'm Sammy.
And I'm Nicole.
And we are Spooky Sleuths.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Welcome back to Spooky Sleuths. Today we are talking about a big one.
Yes, we're going to talk about the Zodiac Killer, who is my personal favorite serial killer.
If it's problematic to probably have a favorite serial killer.
Probably is, but it's fine. That's who we are. I don't love him because of his kills. His kills aren't very, innovative or anything like that. He only killed 7 people.
Which is wild to me because of how big it got, like all the media and everything.
The interesting part is the cat and mouse game.
Yes.
But this one's going to read a little differently because we don't have any backstory to give you about the murderer. We're just going to basically talk about the victims and how this cat and mouse game happened, what happened during this time. And we're also going to talk about a few of the suspects at the end.
But again, nobody has been...
I could be the Zodiac Killer.
No, you couldn't, Sammy.
I was alive 40 years after this happened.
Yep.
Anyway.
And also... You couldn't stay quiet about it the way they have.
Nope.
The guilt would eat you alive.
I'll be putting up a Snapchat story. I could never. I would feel guilty if I killed anything. If I killed a dog or something, like if I hit one
Sammy,
with my car.
you could have a bad thought and then feel guilty.
Yeah. I can't lie. I can't do anything bad. Yeah. Anyway.
Let's get into it.
Our story starts back in December of 1968 with a teenage couple in their car parked on a remote road outside of Vallejo, California.
What is it with California?
I don't know, man. California and Canada are like all the cases we cover.
I know, it's wild. We've done a few Florida ones now.
Yeah. 17-year-old David Faraday and his date, 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen, were confronted by a man while they sat in their parked car.
They sat in their parked car.
Right. The man used a flashlight to see the children, because that's what they were, but this light also made it to where they could not see him. The man approached Betty's side, the passenger side of the vehicle, and fired his pew-pew weapon into the car to force them out. Betty exited first, and then David. As David was getting out of the car, the man shot him. Betty took off running, and the man shot her as well. David died from his wounds on the way to the hospital, as the man shot him in the head. Betty was shot 5 times in the back and died instantly. The only evidence that was left behind were the bullets. They were a Winchester Western Super X copper-coated long rifle. Because of this type of ammunition, the police were able to determine that this weapon was a .22 caliber semi-automatic pew-pew. There was no other evidence left behind. No fingerprints, no witnesses, nothing. Due to them having no leads on who this mystery man was, some other conclusions were drawn about these murders. One former detective of the Vallejo Police Department stated that David actually had inside information about a drug deal that was going to take place. Not only that, but he was telling people about the drug deal and who was involved. So this detective thought his murder was related to that. Others believe that the Zodiac would have bragged about this killing to the media, and since he didn't, it wasn't the Zodiac's kill. Because the Zodiac would write and call the police every time he killed someone after this one. It would later come out in a letter that the Zodiac wrote that he did murder the kids, and he wrote specific details that the public was not aware of about this crime.
So at first it wasn't connected to the Zodiac until later.
Right.
Okay.
And this was his first kill, so they really didn't know what they were working with here. The next attack wouldn't take place until July 5th, just after midnight on July 4th. Like, July 4th was the previous day, yeah. Darlene Ferrin and Mike Mageau were sitting in Darlene's car at Blue Rock Springs Park outside of Vallejo, California.
Does he have a problem with, like, Lover's Lane?
It seems like that, right? Darlene was married.
Oh, Darlene.
And she worked as a waitress, and Mike was a single laborer. The two were supposedly parked in Darlene's car just to talk.
That's what I'd say, too.
That's when a car pulled into the parking lot a few feet behind them. A man got out of the vehicle and approached Mike's side of the vehicle, again the passenger side. The pair thought this was a police officer as he held a flashlight and approached them. The man then used his pew-pew weapon and fired 5 shots. The man began walking back to his car, thinking he had killed the two. But that's when Mike started screaming in pain. So the man turned around and fired his weapon 2 more times into both Mike and Darlene. This interaction, the man coming back to shoot the pair again, is very important. Mike was able to get a look at the man. Although he had tried to ensure he had killed both victims, Mike actually survived. He was able to tell the police that the killer was a white man about 5 foot 8 inches tall in his late 20s to early 30s. Mike stated that the man had a stocky build, a round face, and brown hair. So after this murder, there's a little bit more evidence. The police were able to determine from the ammunition found that the man used a 9mm semi-automatic weapon, which is different from the weapon in the first murders.
Which is another reason why it took so long to connect.
Right. But now we have a description of the man. Something else was different about this murder and attempted murder. A phone call afterwards. About 45 minutes after the shooting, the police got a phone call from a man taking responsibility for the attack. He provided details about the murder, including the weapon used, and took responsibility for the first 2 murders. July 31st of 1969, the Vallejo Times-Herald, San Francisco Examiner, and San Francisco Chronicle were sent letters from the killer. There were details in these letters that only the killer, police, and victims knew about. But that's not all. Each of the 3 letters contained a different piece of a cipher. The killer claimed that his identity was inside the cipher, which is known as the Z408 cipher because it contained 408 symbols. This cipher would be solved a week later by a couple in Salinas, California. Donald and Betty Harden loved ciphers and were able to solve this riddle. There were a lot of misspellings in this cipher, so all it really made sense that they could come up with was, "I like killing because it is fun." His identity was not given at this point. In 1991, Mike, the surviving victim of the second attack, he was shown pictures of the suspects in the killings. He identified a man by the name of Arthur Lee Allen, who was the detective's top suspect. We'll talk about Arthur in a little bit, but Mike claims that he did not identify Arthur in the 20 years prior to this because he had never been shown a picture. He was just asked if he recognized any names. So the police are doing all this investigating, coming up with their suspects, and then not doing like a photo lineup for the person who saw the man.
That seems very, very negligent.
Yeah.
I swear, sometimes they just don't do it right.
They don't. So let's go back to 1969 in September. Around 6:15 p.m. on September 27th, Cecelia, Shepard, and Bryan Hartnell were just having a nice afternoon along Lake Berryessa, which is near Napa, California. Cecelia noticed a man in a weird costume walking toward them with a pew-pew weapon in his hand. The man told the couple that he escaped from a prison in either Montana or Colorado, and he needed their money and a car so he could flee to Mexico. Bryan offered the man his wallet and keys, but of course he didn't take it. Instead, he tied the couple up with a plastic clothesline. After they were tied up, he began stabbing both of them. Cecelia was stabbed 5 times in the front and 5 times in the back. Bryan was stabbed 6 times in the back, and he was also the first one stabbed. So this kind of makes me feel like he's trying to shoot the men first or stab the men first, incapacitate the men so he can't be overtaken.
That makes sense.
The knife he used...
Take out who he views as the person.
Right.
That, what word am I trying to think of? Take out the threat before...
Right.
Completing the crime.
The knife he used was 10 to 12 inches long and had a wooden handle. After stabbing the couple, the man just walked away. After a few minutes, a fisherman heard the couple screaming.
So he didn't even make sure that they were dead?
No. He went to get the park ranger, and help arrived for the two. They were able to untie themselves while they waited, but they were in critical condition.
I'm sure.
Cecelia died at the hospital, but Bryan fully recovered. So this is the second man that has lived. He's also more violent with the females.
Yeah, absolutely.
He shot one in the head, or shot one in the back 5 times. He stabbed her 10 times. He's less violent with the men. I just think that's interesting.
It gives mommy issues.
It does. Bryan is actually an attorney in Southern California currently, today. This murder got Ted Bundy thrown into the suspect pool, though. Thankfully, there were fingerprints from the murder, but these fingerprints... Thankfully, there were fingerprints from the murder, but these fingerprints did clear Ted Bundy from being the killer.
That's not Ted's MO anyways.
No. An hour after the murder...
I say Ted like we're on a first name basis. That's not Bundy's MO.
Mr. Bundy. An hour after the murder, the Napa Police Department got a call from the man who confirmed the attack. The police traced the phone to a booth in downtown Napa. This is where they got those fingerprints from. Mm. When the police found the victim's car, they also found a message from the killer. On the car door, police found the dates of the first and second murders. This message was signed with a symbol, which is now synonymous with the Zodiac Killer. The symbol is the circle with the cross inside. We'll post a picture of it. The police had some additional evidence in this crime. Not only do we have the message on the car door with the new symbol, but Bryan was able to identify the man's costume. This is the first time he wore a costume, which we'll show a picture of here too. In addition, the detectives found tire tracks behind the car and shoe prints. The shoe prints were a size 10.5 wing walker shoe, but the depth of the imprints was able to give the police the information that he weighed over 210 pounds. Police knew they weren't looking for a skinny guy. Now we have a third weapon used, right? Because we had 2 different pew-pew weapons and now a knife. But we also have a costume, shoe prints, tire tracks, and this message on the car window where he's taking credit. The next murder is October 11th of 1969. Paul Stein was a 29-year-old cab driver in San Francisco, California. A man hailed his cab at Mason and Geary Streets intersection, and the man told him he wanted to go to Washington and Maple Streets. These streets mean nothing to me, but they are kind of important. The cab was found a block away at Washington and Cherry Streets, so a block from his destination. So he was stopped early. That's why it's important, because he didn't even get there. This is where Paul was shot once in the head at point blank range.
While he was driving?
Yes.
That's risky.
He was either driving or he was pulled off. I couldn't really, but yeah.
Still.
He was behind the wheel.
Yeah.
The weapon used was a 9mm semi-automatic weapon, but it was different than the first 9mm that he used.
By first, I mean just the first 9mm that was in the second kill,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the first one was a...
So now we have 4 weapons that he's used.
That's wild.
The police...
Does he just have an arsenal? We'll never know.
And I think this contributes to kind of the theory that this was a former military man, because he was good with weapons and he owned weapons, and that's just kind of like the stigma. I mean, especially back then, you know.
Absolutely.
The police noticed that Paul's wallet and keys were missing.
That's weird. He doesn't normally rob them.
Right. A large portion of his shirt was also torn off.
We're taking trophies now?
Right. The police were able to find bloody fingerprints and a pair of size 7 men's leather gloves. These prints, along with the ones that were found at the phone booth, were never a match for any suspect that the detectives had.
Have they ran it recently by any chance? I mean, he's probably dead by now, but...
I don't think so. This murder had witnesses, too. The witnesses said...
He's getting brave.
He is. He's getting a little sloppy. The witnesses said that the man wiped the cab down with a cloth after the murder. These witnesses called the police immediately, and they gave a good description. The witnesses said that he was a white male who was 25 to 30 years old. The man had a stocky build, reddish-brown hair with a crew cut, and he wore thick-rimmed glasses and dark clothing. The witnesses even told the dispatch that he was walking north on Cherry Street. The dispatcher misheard the description and told the police the suspect was a black male. The 2 patrol officers that responded saw a white male walking east on Jackson Street, but they didn't stop him because they were looking for a black man. The officers got a good look at him and realized after they received the correct description that they had encountered him.
I would be so upset if I
Yes.
was those police officers.
2 days after this, the San Francisco Chronicle newspaper received a letter from the killer. This letter contained an admission for the murder of Paul and a piece of his bloody shirt. So, Paul's murder really didn't seem like it fit in with the Zodiac's MO.
No.
At all. It's a single person.
Took trophies and everything.
Robbed them, took a trophy. Doesn't really fit his MO. But then he proves it was him.
Right. It just tells you that he's... It makes you wonder just how many Zodiac kills there actually are.
Right. That's why I say there's only 7 attributed to him.
Right, that he claimed.
Right. The witnesses that saw the crime were also able to work with a sketch artist and gave a good composite sketch. This would be circulated in the Bay Area as kind of a wanted poster.
Not to backtrack, but also I wonder if the dispatcher misheard or if it was her bias making her mishear.
That's true. I mean, that time period and that location.
Yeah. And the crime.
Yeah. While the murder of Paul Stine was the last known Zodiac victim, the games didn't stop there. On October 22nd, in 1969, the Zodiac Killer called the police.
Does he just get bored? Sup, guys?
This is the call where he named himself and then started naming himself in his letters.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but killers who name themselves suck. That's not up to you.
You don't get to decide your name.
No, the media does it. It is not cute. Anyway.
Because that is the last name that I would associate with this guy.
Right. The Zodiac wanted an attorney named F. Lee Bailey to appear on a local talk show. But he did tell the police in case F. Lee Bailey was unable to appear, lawyer Melvin Belly was acceptable. Melvin Belly was able to appear, so he did. Sure enough, a man claiming to be the Zodiac called in and talked to him. The host was Jim Dunbar, and he facilitated the conversation. The man agreed to be called Sam for the call. The conversation talked about Sam having headaches that cannot be controlled. At one point, Sam screamed and said that it was his headache. He actually stated, "My headaches, I'm so sick. I'm having one of my headaches," before screaming again and then stating, "I'm going to kill them. I'm going to kill all those kids."
Oh my gosh.
On TV. After the show, Melvin actually talked to Sam privately and offered to meet him and help him. They agreed to meet at a cafe, but there was so much press and police presence that no one showed. In November, another cipher was received called Z340. This one wasn't solved until 2020.
Oh.
Yeah. It was solved by a Belgian programmer, an Australian mathematician, and an American cryptologist. Part of the cipher read, "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner because I now have enough slaves to work for me."
Wow.
Yeah. In December of that year, Melvin received a letter to his home along with a scrap of clothing. The scrap of clothing was Paul Stein's shirt.
Yeah.
The letter read, "This is the Zodiac speaking. I wish you a Merry Christmas. The one thing I ask of you is this. Please help me. I cannot reach out for help because of this thing in me won't let me. I am finding it extremely difficult to hold it in check. I am afraid I will lose control again and take my 9th and possibly 10th victim. Please help me. I am drowning."
So wait, where did the 8th victim come
I
from?
have no idea.
Okay.
At the moment, the children are safe from the bomb because it is so massive to dig in, and the trigger mech required much work to get it adjusted just right. But if I hold back too long from number 9, I will lose all control of myself and set the bomb up. Please help me. I cannot remain in control for much longer.
So there's definitely missing victims.
Yes. This letter is believed to be legitimate, both because of the evidence it contained and because a handwriting expert evaluated it. It is filled with misspelled words and bad grammar with very little punctuation.
Do they think that's intentional or?
No, I've seen different things. Some believe that it is intentional, and some believe that it's just how he is. Like,
Okay.
that's just him. But this letter tells us a few things. The killer wants help. He wants Melvin to help him with whatever is going on that is causing him to murder people. To me, this sounds more of a mental illness type of situation.
Yes.
Of course, I can't say for sure because we don't know who it is. This letter also tells us that the Sam he talked to was probably not the real Zodiac, but a fraud. Because he had to prove who he was with this letter. He sent a scrap of clothing from a Zodiac victim. Unless, my other thought on this is that the person who called in as Sam was the person who killed Paul Stein. Because it was so different from the Zodiac's other killings. Maybe he was impersonating the killings. Because these letters weren't confidential.
Like a copycat.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm never going to know. That bothers me. But whatever.
She's not hurt or anything. Also, if you hear screaming, my child has learned that she can now scream. I'm sorry. I will try to edit that out as much as I can.
The most important thing we learn from this letter is that he plans to kill again. He's planning to kill children. This was the last piece of credible communication that the Zodiac Killer made with Melvin.
Okay.
He did receive a call from the same man that talked on the talk show, Sam. This was concerning at first because the caller stated, "I can't wait. Today is my birthday." But nothing happened, so they determined that this man was pretending to be the Zodiac. So they were assuming he was meaning, I can't wait. Today's my birthday. I'm going to go set that bomb off.
Yeah.
But nothing happened. The Zodiac Killer would go on to send 2 more ciphers, both of which have never been decoded. He also continued to send letters and taunt the police until the early 1970s. No one has ever been convicted for the murders and attempted murders, and the police decided to close this case in 2004. But there are several suspects as to who the Zodiac is. I want to talk about just a couple of them. I could go on and on and on about suspects. We ain't got that kind of time. So.
But if you guys are interested and you'd like a part 2, let us know.
We will do a part 2. But all of that in one episode? No. Mm-mm. The first is the one we mentioned earlier, Arthur Lee Allen. Arthur was a former school teacher, but he was also a convicted child molester. The first reason he was a suspect is because he was actually talking about writing a book where a killer named the Zodiac would stalk and murder couples, then write letters to the police about it. He even wore a watch with the Zodiac symbol.
That's weird.
And the typewriter that Arthur owned was the same kind that the Zodiac used to write his letters. But the problem was there was no evidence at all to tie Arthur to these murders. His fingerprints didn't match, and honestly, looking at a picture of him, which we'll post, he doesn't match the description.
But the one survivor ID'd him in a lineup, right? Like in a photo lineup.
Right, but he doesn't look like what he described that day. The identification he gave 20 years later does not match the description of a man that he described the day he was attacked.
Which is more credible.
Right.
A lot can happen in 20 years.
It can. I don't remember what I did yesterday. Couldn't tell you who I talked to or saw yesterday. It was no one. I work from home. But couldn't tell you.
I tried to see her yesterday, but she was busy.
Writing this episode. We will never get a confession from Arthur, as he died in 1992 from a heart attack. The next suspect is a man named Richard Gakowski. Richard was a former armyman.
A farmy army.
Farmy army. Richard was a former armyman in the 1950s and was a trained medic. He moved to San Francisco in 1963 and remained in the area for the duration of the murders. Richard worked for a newspaper that was under the Vallejo Times-Herald. And he moved to the Good Times newspaper later. Both newspapers have connections to the Zodiac Killer. Letters were sent to the Vallejo Times-Herald, and the Good Times newspaper was based only a few yards from where Paul Stine was murdered.
Listen, that seems pretty sussy to me.
It does. Richard actually attended Paul's funeral, too. Also, a police dispatcher who spoke to the Zodiac identified his voice as the same voice that she listened to on that Zodiac call. So she says he's a match. But he also is dead. He passed away in 2004. So we ain't ever going to get to talk to these 2 people that were the 2 of the main suspects. Arthur was the top suspect, and then Richard was one of the others. Like I said, I could go on and on about the suspects, and they need their own episode. So let us know if you want to hear more. We can do a part 2. There are a lot of theories about the Zodiac Killer, and honestly, we may never know who it is or was. The closest we are is Arthur, but I personally don't think he's the killer. I just don't think the descriptions match. And I think the crimes are very different. He had a sexually based crime. These were murder.
Yeah.
None of the victims were sexually assaulted. Only one was robbed. I mean, I don't think it fits his criminal background.
Right.
But I don't know. Him wanting to write a book.
Yeah, that's weird.
Very, very strange. I see why the police have him as their top suspect.
Yeah.
But
I would too.
so let us know what you guys think. If you made it this far, leave us a car emoji in the comments. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment over on YouTube if you're listening there. If you're listening over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure you leave us a rate and review.
Come check us out on Instagram and TikTok at Spooky Sleuths Pod. We're pretty active over there. We go live on TikTok pretty frequently now. And on that note, stay spooky, friends.